Emma's tray crashed to the floor, plates shattering across the lavish cruise ship lounge. Her eyes widened in panic as Richard, wealthy, arrogant, and powerful, grabbed her wrist and yanked her aggressively toward him. "Where do you think you're going?" Richard sneered, clearly intending harm. Around them, the snobby elites laughed, enjoying Emma's humiliation. They sipped drinks casually, entertained by her fear and distress. Emma struggled helplessly, but Richard tightened his grip, smirking cruelly. "You're not going anywhere. I'm not done with you yet." Nearby, Jason Statham quietly observed, his coffee untouched. His jaw clenched as he took in every cruel laugh, every look of terror on Emma's face. He knew exactly what was happening, and exactly what he was about to do. Richard's arrogance peaked as he mocked loudly. "What? No one brave enough to help her." The crowd stayed silent, shifting uncomfortably but doing nothing. Richard felt invincible, sure no one would dare intervene. But Jason had seen enough. Slowly, deliberately, Jason rose to his feet, eyes locked dangerously onto Richard. "Let her go." Richard chuckled, oblivious to the danger. He had no idea he was seconds away from the worst humiliation of his life. Before continue, like and subscribe to catch Jason Statham's epic face-off with snobby elites, and comment where you're watching from today. The luxury cruise radiated elegance. Crystal chandeliers glittered above, velvet-lined chairs were occupied by impeccably dressed passengers, and soft music created an atmosphere reserved for society's elite. In the VIP lounge, exclusivity was palpable. Wealth wasn't just displayed, it was flaunted openly. At a corner table sat Jason Statham, quietly sipping his coffee, blending seamlessly into the upscale environment. His casual attire, simple black shirt and dark jeans, contrasted sharply with the tailored suits and designer gowns around him. Though calm and unassuming, Jason's confidence was evident. He didn't need flashy clothes or ostentatious jewelry to project strength. Across from Jason, Richard laughed loudly, holding court with fellow elites who nodded along, eager for his approval. His tailored suit and diamond cufflinks declared his status, but it was his sneering tone and condescending smirk that truly revealed his character. Emma moved quietly between the tables, a waitress doing her job with practiced efficiency. Her uniform was tidy but simple, a stark contrast to the room's extravagance. She served the guests quietly, avoiding unnecessary attention, but her dignity shone through in the way she held her head high despite the obvious power imbalance. Jason observed quietly, sipping his coffee with thoughtful detachment. His gaze lingered on Emma momentarily, noticing her steady professionalism amidst subtle mistreatment by the entitled guests. Richard's eyes narrowed slightly, as if irritated by her quiet dignity. He began loudly criticizing her service, drawing chuckles from his companions. Jason stayed silent, patient, calmly assessing the escalating scene without drawing attention to himself. He wasn't one for hasty reactions, preferring control and precision above impulsive anger. Emma approached Richard's table, carefully placing down their dessert. Richard's hand shot out, gripping her wrist firmly. His gaze darkened with malice, pulling Emma forcefully toward him. Her startled gasp pierced the air, echoing briefly before the room fell awkwardly quiet. Guests glanced over uneasily but did nothing, each unwilling to risk confrontation with the influential billionaire. Richard's smirk deepened, relishing Emma's discomfort. He leaned in closer, voice dripping with mockery. "Don't pretend you don't enjoy the attention." Jason's fingers tightened slowly around his coffee cup. Every muscle in his body tensed subtly, eyes narrowing as he set the cup down deliberately. His calm demeanor masked a storm building beneath the surface. Without a word, Jason rose steadily to his feet. The casual confidence in his movements instantly drew attention. Richard was too arrogant to sense the danger, but he was about to. Emma's tray wobbled slightly as she approached the VIP table, keeping her head down, determined to remain professional. Richard leaned back, eyeing her like an object rather than a person. The moment she placed a drink in front of him, he reached out and grabbed her wrist. "You should take a break," he sneered, tugging her slightly closer. "Or maybe keep me company instead." Emma froze, her face turning pale. "Sir, please, I have work to do," she said softly, trying to pull away. The surrounding elites burst into laughter. To them, this was entertainment. Emma's discomfort? Irrelevant. Richard tightened his grip, his smirk widening. Come on, no need to be shy. It's just a little fun. Emma's hands trembled. The humiliation was unbearable. And that's when a chair scraped against the marble floor. The laughter died instantly. Jason Statham stood up, his presence shifting the entire atmosphere. His eyes locked onto Richard, cold and calculating. Let her go. Richard snorted, amused. Or what? He taunted. She's fine. Aren't you, sweetheart? Emma's desperate eyes flicked toward Jason. He didn't move, didn't blink, yet his presence alone screamed danger. I wasn't asking. Jason's tone remained calm, but the weight behind it was suffocating. The room fell into silence. Even those who found this amusing a moment ago sensed something had shifted. Richard, not used to being challenged, chuckled and gave one final, deliberate yank on Emma's wrist. That was his last mistake. Jason moved. Fast. Before Richard could react, Jason's hand clamped around his wrist, vice-like, unyielding. A sharp gasp escaped Richard's lips. His confidence shattered instantly. Jason twisted his wrist, forcing him to release Emma. Richard grunted in pain, eyes widening in shock. His strength meant nothing here. Emma stumbled back, breath shaky. The crowd held their breath. Jason didn't let go. He leaned in slightly, voice lower, deadlier. I warned you. The tension thickened. The elites, who had laughed moments ago, now watched in stunned silence. Even the bodyguards hesitated, sensing something dangerous. Richard clenched his jaw, trying to play it off. This is a mistake, he hissed. Jason's grip tightened slightly, sending another jolt of pain through Richard's arm. No. The mistake was thinking you could do whatever you want. Richard gritted his teeth, eyes darting around for help. No one stepped in. No one wanted to. And Jason wasn't done yet. The moment Richard's pained grunt escaped his lips, his bodyguards sprang into action. Two large men in sleek suits rushed forward, expecting an easy takedown. Big mistake. The first lunged, aiming to grab Jason's shoulder. Jason barely moved, then struck. A precise elbow to the ribs. Crack. The bodyguard collapsed instantly, gasping for air. The second hesitated. Jason didn't. With a smooth pivot, he caught the man's wrist mid-swing, twisting brutally. The bodyguard's face contorted in agony before Jason flipped him over the table. Crash. Plates shattered, glass rained down. Gasps filled the room. Phones went up. The elites, once oozing arrogance, paled in shock. This wasn't supposed to happen. Jason's movements had been too fast, too precise, too destructive. Richard. He was sweating now, panic setting in. The confidence he wore like a badge? Gone. And then, desperation. Richard's eyes darted to the steak knife on the table. His fingers curled around the handle. He lunged. The crowd gasped. Jason didn't. In a blink, Jason moved. His hand clamped onto Richard's wrist, crushing it like steel. The knife. Gone. Jason had already twisted it free and flung it aside. Richard let out a choked yell. Jason's grip tightened. His voice low, cold, final. You're done. Richard's world flipped. The power dynamic had shattered. He was the one powerless now. With one brutal yank, Jason slammed Richard onto the same table he once lounged at so arrogantly. Silverware clattered. Glass toppled. A rich man's dignity crumbled. Jason released him with a shove, letting Richard stumble backward. Then came the final blow, the one that would haunt Richard forever. Jason grabbed a nearby glass of water and, without hesitation, poured it over Richard's head. Mockery. Reversed. Public humiliation. Served cold. The crowd erupted in whispers. Phones captured every second. Richard. Completely destroyed. Jason. Untouched. Unbothered. And justice. Delivered. Richard stood there, soaked, breathless, utterly humiliated. His usual smugness? Gone. Jason's stare didn't waver. His presence alone made the elites shrink back, their confidence crumbling. The entire room was still watching, recording, waiting. Jason took one step forward. Richard flinched. Apologized to her. Richard swallowed hard, glancing at the stunned waitress. Emma, still gripping her tray, looked like she wasn't sure if this was real. His lips trembled, but no words came out. Jason tilted his head slightly. I said, apologize. Richard's breath came in shallow bursts. He knew there was no escape. His voice broke as he finally muttered, I'm sorry. Jason didn't blink. Louder. The crowd leaned in. Phones still recording. I'm sorry. Richard practically choked on the words. His voice cracked, the humiliation now irreversible. A beat of silence. Then, a slow ripple of applause. It started small. A few guests clapped, their eyes flickering between Jason and the elites. Then more joined in, some cheering, others just reveling in the sheer poetic justice of it all. Richard stood frozen, his soaked hair dripping onto his designer suit. The applause felt like daggers. Jason's voice cut through it all like steel. Remember this moment next time you pick on someone powerless. The elites looked completely shattered. The hierarchy they once ruled over? Destroyed. Jason turned to Emma, his voice softer now. You okay? She blinked, still in shock, then nodded slowly. A smile, small but real, formed on her lips. Jason gave a slight nod in return. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away. The elites didn't move. Richard. He just stood there, fists clenched, knowing he would never live this down. And the crowd? They would never forget the day Jason Statham reminded the rich that money can't buy respect. The applause faded, but the impact lingered. Jason turned back to Emma, who still clutched her tray, her hands trembling. Just moments ago, she had been humiliated, powerless. Now, in the same room where she had been mocked, she stood surrounded by silent respect. Jason picked up the tray she had dropped earlier, setting it gently back in her hands. You all right? His voice was calm, steady. Emma swallowed hard and nodded. Yeah. Thanks to you. Jason didn't respond, just gave a slight nod, then stepped back. Then, something unexpected happened. A woman stepped forward, placing a $100 bill on Emma's tray. For the service. And for what you put up with. Another followed. Then another. Within moments, passengers were offering tips, words of encouragement. Some even asking about the handmade jewelry Emma sold in the cruise shop. Emma's eyes widened, blinking back tears. Not just from the money, but from the shift in energy. The same people who had watched in silence before were now standing beside her. Meanwhile, Richard and the elites were gone. Humiliated, they had slipped away, their arrogance shattered. The same people who once hung onto their every word now whispered about their disgrace. Jason glanced once more at Emma. She met his gaze, standing taller now. Jason gave her a final nod, then turned to leave. No need for thanks. No need for recognition. His work was done. As he stepped onto the deck, disappearing into the night, one thought remained clear in every witness's mind. Some people buy power. Others earn respect. That night, the elites on the luxury cruise learned a lesson they would never forget. Power wasn't about money, connections, or expensive suits. It was about respect. And respect was earned, not bought. Richard, once so confident, so untouchable, was now a ghost in the background, forgotten, avoided. His humiliation etched into the memory of every witness. But the real impact? It wasn't just about putting the elites in their place. It was about restoring dignity. Emma, once mocked, belittled, powerless, now stood with her head held high. Not because Jason had saved her, but because he reminded her, and everyone else, that cruelty only holds power if it's allowed to. Jason never needed praise. He didn't wait for thanks. He simply walked away, vanishing into the night. His presence felt long after he was gone. Real strength isn't about wealth or power. It's about how you use it. Stand up. Speak out. Defend those who can't defend themselves. Because sometimes, all it takes is one person to change everything.